I finally know what to say about New Japan Pro Wrestling and Jon Moxley and all of the wrestling in between. What up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Square Circle Podcast. I am your host, Marie Shadows. And on this episode of the Square Circle Podcast, yes, I will be diving into New Japan Pro Wrestling, Jon Moxley, and everything that has been going on between New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW. This would be somewhat of a structured kind of thought process of a podcast episode talking about those topics. I may go off those topics. I may stay on topic. Who knows? But I would love that you listen to the very end. And I would love that if you have an open mind to what I'm about to talk about. And the enlightenment came because I've been struggling to make a podcast episode like this to talk about the many people on my Twitter and then in Twitter in general that don't understand why I do not like Jon Moxley as New Japan Pro Wrestling champion, and that the weeks leading up to June 9th is enough time to create story between Jon Moxley and his next opponent at Dominion over in Japan, which is Evil, who is from House of Torture. There is clearly not enough time to make a really, really good, interesting story where wrestling fans can shut up about how much they hate Evil and House of Torture. It is super annoying to hear the same rhetoric that gets thrown around about House of Torture. Yes, I will be defending House of Torture in this podcast episode. And if you don't like that, you can definitely become a member to the new community I'm building over at locals.com. If you don't know what Locals is, it is another type of membership service similar to the Patreons, the Coffees, and any other subscription-based websites out there. The only difference is that Locals empowers independence. So independent content creators like myself who makes original wrestling content, we are able to own our content, we're able to share it with the world, and we will not be censored. And that does not mean that you get to be disrespectful and talk crazy and post. If you decide to become a member of that community that I have over there, to discredit, to defame, or do anything Twitter related over on the community at Locals, which is wrestlingroots.hub.locals.com, just because Locals gives us the freedom to speak how we want and do what we want does not mean that we're going to be disrespecting professional wrestling. My whole idea is not to recreate the vibe that is on Twitter. My whole idea is to create a healthy environment and conversation about professional wrestling where we do deep dives, where we geek out a little bit, where we become fangirls and fanboys to a certain degree, where everything is of respectable posting and manners and everything like that. Wrestling Roots Hub over at Locals is all about honoring the past while looking towards the future and the present of professional wrestling and to elevate professional wrestling. It's not just about this sucks, that sucks. I've never been that type of person to just be like, that sucks and leave it at that and create a whole negative experience for other wrestling fans. It's always been about, let's talk about it. Let's break it down. How can we elevate it? What kind of ideas can we throw in there? And what kind of fantasy booking can we do for the betterment of making wrestling better than it was yesterday? That's exactly what I want to recreate over at wrestlingroots.hub.locals.com. So again, because I will be defending House of Torture, and I know that will piss some people off, which is okay. It's totally okay. You don't have to agree with me on these podcast episodes. But the only reason why I'm defending House of Torture is because I finally understand why they do the things that they do. And because I work in the business and because I network with other wrestlers and other industry personnel, I know exactly why they do what they do, their motivations, their background, and I get it. A lot of wrestling fans just see House of Torture shenanigans for what it is, surface level. And let me be the first to tell you that I was like that too. I was definitely one of those fans that kept listening to Kevin Kelly bury the shit out of them for no good reason. And as a fan, I looked at his surface level. It wasn't until I did a little digging, talked to people, network with people, that I truly understood why House of Torture does what House of Torture does. And I will be explaining that here on the podcast episode. However, if you made it this far, thank you for making it this far, which is like close to 6 minutes in. Even though this is like 5 minutes, it's close to 6 minutes. But either way, if you made it this far, that means that you want to learn something. If you didn't make it this far and you sent me either a DM saying, how could I like House of Torture? Or you signed up at wrestleroots.hub.locals.com, then maybe there might be hope for you to want to have an open mind. I don't know. But I will be defending House of Torture, like I said. And I would love to see you guys over at wrestleroots.hub.locals.com. I would like to see you over at marieshadows.substack.com. That is the newsletter that goes along with the Square Circle podcast and everything that I do behind the scenes. And anything else that I promote throughout this podcast episode in ways that you can support me, support the podcast, support the channel, support everything that I do. Every single link that I say will be down in the description below, here on Spotify, here on YouTube, and anywhere else that you get your podcasts on. With that being said, please make sure to share this out if you are on Spotify. The more friends that you share this podcast episode with, the more my listener base grows. And when that grows, I will eventually be in the monetization program on Spotify. For right now, you're getting this for free, but if you want to help me go the extra mile for free as well, because word of mouth is very, very free, please go tell a friend, share it out. And I am forever grateful that you have done that for me, for the podcast, and for yourself. Okay, let's jump into this. If you don't know, I have been saying for weeks, maybe a month now, that Jon Moxley is not my IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. And that is because the way he won it against Naito felt like a wrench was thrown into the original plans. And it really does feel like a power move that Tony Khan wanted it that way. So that way Jon Moxley could get that check in that checkbox of being the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. Now, New Japan Pro Wrestling is in a transitional state where, yes, AEW and Tony Khan has taken all of the top superstars in New Japan Pro Wrestling. AEW has taken Jay White, which I have eventually got over and I'm okay with now, because it seems like Jay White, along with Austin Gunn and Colton Gunn, creating the Bang Bang Gang, is the only interesting thing on AEW programming. And not only is the Bang Bang Gang the only thing on AEW programming that is interesting to see evolve, they are the most consistent group in the last 5 years. Consistent. People here might throw in the Acclaimed, but they needed Daddy Ass. They needed Billy Gunn for that push to be over when they were already over. But their popularity is dying out. So you can't use that as an argument here. This is why I would say the Bang Bang Gang, which is Jay White and the Guns, being the most consistent and the most interesting act on AEW. And so I've gotten over the fact that Jay White went to AEW. Totally okay. Now, AEW took Aussie Open, which is Kyle Fletcher and Mark Davis. Mark Davis is still recovering from his knee surgery that Tony Khan paid for, which makes him a very swell guy. But nonetheless, AEW was like, hey, here's all the money in the world. Come over here. And what is Kyle Fletcher doing? Being the Ring of Honor television champion. on a promotion, network, paywall type of content that no one really sees or talks about. And then eventually Kyle does make his way to AEW Dynamite to have some matches and show off the Ring of Honor belt. But in reality, no one really cares about the Ring of Honor brand anymore because it's not a brand that has an identity. It's attached to AEW, and that's hurting the wrestlers that are on the Ring of Honor quote unquote brand. Like, for example, why does Athena have to keep saying in interviews and maybe using social media to continue to say, hey, when am I going to get booked on Dynamite? I'm the most dominant champion here on Ring of Honor. When am I going to get booked on Dynamite? When am I going to show up on Dynamite? You can just go to Dynamite. You don't need Tony Khan's permission to go between the brands if it's the same brand. Ring of Honor is under the brand of AEW. This isn't like back in the day for like WWE where like being on a brand meant something and it was brand supremacy. And they made a very clear distinction that this is Raw, this is SmackDown. And it was always like bragging rights of like who had the best time on Raw and SmackDown, and if somebody wanted to go over to another brand, you know, yeah, they would probably ask, but sometimes they just show up and then they'll be like, well, I'm the badass for showing up. Why can't Athena just do that? Why can't Athena just like go over there? And no, Rampage and Collision does not count in this conversation because she specifically says, why can I not get booked on Dynamite? My point being is that people get forgotten on AEW. While New Japan Pro Wrestling tries to make everybody have a place, have time, have a little segment in the back, whether that's them cutting a promo, they try to make time for people. And then, not too far after Aussie Open gets their AEW offer, here comes Ospreay. And the one mistake that Ospreay did was signing his AEW contract while he was still under New Japan contract. Yes, it was out in the open that his New Japan contract was coming up and there was talks, but nothing really went through. He wanted more money because now he has a family and he just needed the extra money, which I totally get. We all need extra money. I get that. However, you were one of their top stars. And to just sign an AEW contract while you're still under New Japan, to me, I'm just like, bro, you broke loyalty there. The same way that Aussie Open jumped and Ospreay jumped, and now United Empire is in a state of flux of how the fuck to recover. Because they haven't recovered ever since those three guys decided to jump ship and forget about their team. Yeah, I am going to say it. It has been bugging me that there was no talks, or maybe there was because I don't really know. But surface level, when you look at it, it's like you guys didn't even have a group meeting to be like, what is the best? And if you guys did have a group meeting, no other foundation was put in place of like, okay, what happens after you guys leave? Who's going to step up? What story are we going to do? How are we going to go forward with the United Empire? Because let's face it, every single one of those guys brought something different to the table that I was like, this is what we need in New Japan Pro Wrestling. This is what we need in wrestling in general. And to show people that a team that has a mixed match of different personalities and different cultures coming together, but their underlying fundamental is how they work off of their strengths and their weaknesses. And it was beautiful. Like, United Empire was beautiful and it was a force to be reckoned with. But once you take out the foundations, which is Aussie Open and Will Ospreay, what do you have left? Gideon Gray has yet to show up. Akira has been injured and is unfortunately had to drop out of Best of the Super Juniors. Then you have TJP being the leader. Is he really the leader? The Great Khan basically wanting the King of Pro Wrestling Championship title and doing the most silliest of things. Jeff Cobb chasing after the New Japan World title when I think that he should be chasing after the IWGP title. And then Hinare finally coming back from the brink of death after that really brutal cage match that had War Dogs versus the United Empire. And that story, oh my God, that story was the worst story to ever be done. How the fuck does New Japan Pro Wrestling allow Will Ospreay, the leader, I don't care if he doesn't like it, the leader of the United Empire, to sit home while the War Dogs take advantage of the United Empire? At that moment, I think it was punishment, because New Japan management was like, how dare you sign the AEW contract in the middle of the ring? And just sat him home and was like, nah, we don't need you until the final days of your contract. And I would have been pissed if I was a member of the United Empire and then all of a sudden he comes back and it's supposed to be okay. Like, all right, cool, leader, you're back. Like, Akira here has been stabbed with a fork. Everyone has like low morale, and then all of a sudden you come in to save the day. No. Like, stuff like that gets me upset, because there's no consistency of story when story is everything in professional wrestling, especially when you have this big of a story to tell, these big feelings for people to feel and attach and remember what is going on. And I'm attached to both of these teams. I'm attached to Bullet Club War Dogs because they tell amazing fucking stories. And it's not only just wrestling. So it's not just the flips. It's everything involved in the full package that they give me to be this passionate, to be like, what is wrong with you guys? You guys should have thought this out, talked it out, and, do things right. I'm attached to the United Empire because they all have different types of stories that mesh very well. And you would think that it wouldn't, but it absolutely does. So AEW goes and takes Aussie Open and Will Ospreay, and then next they end up taking Okada. When Okada was crying a fucking river and making a big deal, and we all thought he was going to go to WWE. That's not the case. He went over to the safe place, and now all of his aura of being the Rainmaker has gone. Okada can still go in the ring. Okada is a great wrestler, but the aura, all the years that have been built up around Okada, all the 5-star, 6-star, 7-star matches against Kenny Omega, all of his star power, his aura has gone ever since aligning himself with the Young Bucks. It has not done no favors at all. And Okada should not be in the shadow of nobody. Okada should be that Rainmaker going out there making stars and also making it rain. For some odd reason, he decided to choose the Young Bucks, and I totally get it. You want something familiar. You want to be with your friends. But you want to know what's the one critical thing I learned in life? Do not follow your friends. Go on the path that is provided for you, that you know what you want to do. Because even if you follow your friends do not have the same ambitions, do not have the same goals, and do not have the same dreams as you. So do not follow your friends. Okada would have looked like $1 million in WWE. And there are a lot more people in WWE that can help Okada transition to American television. Now, when we look at Okada joining the Young Bucks, it works, but at the same time, it's dimming the light of Okada and everything that we get excited about for Okada. When Okada was in New Japan Pro Wrestling, it was something to behold, to see him wrestle everybody on the roster and have this I don't give a fuck attitude when it came to people disrespecting him. So all of that, it's just mad weird. Like, why would you go to AEW and want to lose all that aura when that could have been capitalized on WWE programming to a certain degree? And anyway, wouldn't he want to get the chance to fight Jonah, aka Bronson Reed, again, so that way he can avenge that loss? So you might be wondering, what does all of that previous rant have to do with Moxley dethroning Naito at New Japan Pro Wrestling Resurgence not too long ago? And it is simply this. If you know that the promotion that you are partnering with is in a transitional period And New Japan Pro Wrestling has indeed lost its aura and indeed lost its top guys. Why would you make your AEW exclusive wrestler the champion of New Japan Pro Wrestling when you know he's not going to be as committed to a Japanese promotion as he is to an American company, because he is contracted, he is obligated to be in America? He said it himself. Jon Moxley said it himself that he is working on a handshake deal. What that means in professional wrestling, that means that there is no contracts. You have that person's word, and that person could go back on their word at any given time. Now, people may jump in the comment section and say that, well, his word is always loyalty and he's not going to do that. People change. Situations happen. Life happens. If you do not get most of 99% of things written in a contract, you are going to get fucked over. I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen or not going to happen, but New Japan Pro Wrestling could get fucked over at like any day. AEW and Tony Khan is using the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship title as a prop to get better pay-per-view buys and to get better ratings. But as we've seen in the last month and a half, the ratings have not increased. Even if they put out a graphic that says, Jon Moxley will be in the building, the IWGP champion, not my champion, will be in the building. And still, ratings don't go anywhere because American fans don't give a shit about New Japan Pro Wrestling like how Tony Khan probably thinks they do. They really don't. And that's due to how the media in wrestling and in general has sort of been yay for Japanese wrestling at times, and then nay for Japanese wrestling at times, and then wants to cherry pick all the silly, weird things that happen in Japan and put a moral high ground as if like Americans and America is no better. You know, so New Japan and Japanese wrestling and the Japanese culture get like a really bad rep sometimes when we have people who want to clout chase, people who want to say shit or talk shit basically about the culture and don't really care to do the research or have the respect that they should have for someone else's culture. Because at this point, we should all understand that the world is never going to be perfect. These companies are never going to be perfect. But the moment that you show an individual person the respect for their culture or anything like that, just mutually, you'll have a better understanding. You guys will have a better mutual ground, and you guys could end up probably being friends. Now, this is not the case for everything around the world because shit happens. Life happens. We're complicated. We're humans. But at the end of the day, if you show someone that you don't know a little bit of kindness when it's not asked or when it's not forced, when you show them a little bit of kindness just because you're a good person, beautiful things start to happen and things start to open up and conversations get to be had. But I think I'm straying from the main point. The main point of this is that the reason why Japanese wrestling doesn't get really well received is because of how other people have painted it, and people don't want to let go of those narratives. And then when you have someone like me who is like, hey, come watch New Japan Pro Wrestling, come watch Japanese wrestling with me, and let's talk about it, and let's break down this Japanese wrestling, I do it with an open mind and a heart of gold because New Japan Pro Wrestling and Japanese wrestling in general does tell a different type of story than American-based wrestling. Now, over the years, New Japan Pro Wrestling has adopted some of the Western ideals on like what it means to be a wrestler, and they have included lots of different foreign wrestlers, which has helped their market. But again, because of perception is everything. So I try a little bit to change that perception and look at things from a bigger picture and a business way of doing things. Now, going back to AEW, Tony Khan, Jon Moxley, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, if you know that New Japan Pro Wrestling is suffering based on the talent that AEW and Tony Khan took without trying to give them something back in return, and then also just hearing the comments that New Japan Pro Wrestling president Hiroshi Tanahashi made on a recent interview alongside his number one and also the board director for Bushiroad, Kidani. Both of them had interesting things to say in that interview. And Tanahashi actually said that he is envious of how WWE creates superstars so quick and ready for television. And eventually he wants to implement that into New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, that is me paraphrasing the quote, but that is the idea behind the quote. That is what he truly means and said behind the quote. Okay, so it's just paraphrase. Now, with Kidani, on the other hand, said some things too. And of course, this is paraphrasing, but the gist of it was regrettable that Japanese promotions have become farm systems for U.S. companies. What that tells me right there is that they saw it, we all saw it in real time, and that is AEW and Tony Khan taking all the stars from New Japan Pro Wrestling over to the land of AEW because he could give these guys whatever amount of money they asked for with no questions, no direction, no story, no system put in place of like, okay, the reason why I hired you and paid you all this money is because this is the vision I see for you. Tony Khan does not have a vision for any of those guys in AEW. You have to go to AEW pre-built in order to survive. It's not like WWE where like, yeah, it's nice that you are pre-built, but they ultimately have a story for you and you can go and still live your dreams and make the best out of the story that you are given. Now, sometimes people become a success story overnight where they don't need any help like that, but most wrestlers don't have that because most wrestlers focus on fundamentals and wrestling. And while that is part of being the best all-round greatest of all time, you still need to learn a little bit of acting. You still need to learn a little bit of how to deliver lines, how to create a promo, how to get fans emotionally involved, how to create a story, how to create angles, how to pitch things. It's a whole big thing that you have to do. But to be an AEW wrestler just means to continue to be an indie wrestling darling and come pre-built because Tony Khan is not going to have a vision for you. And as Kidani says this, that he regrets that the Japanese promotions have become these farms for U.S. company just to take. That is super telling because what company in the world of professional wrestling has taken the most people? AEW. WWE picks and chooses who fits in to the current roster, the current story, and the current vision. But AEW is like, hey, I have X amount of money. Who wants to come over? And all of them go over because they see dollar signs. And it's not a bad thing to ask for more money. It's not a bad thing to get more money. But you are there to work. So it should sort of balance itself out. It should equal itself out where like you get paid, you get to do what you love to do, and you get to go to more places other than the familiar grounds of AEW, which is like Chicago, Vegas, Cleveland maybe. I don't know anywhere else. But you get the idea that like WWE is touring around the world, visiting other cultures, visiting international fans. How can you give that up for going around the same circuit that AEW does? The other thing that I find interesting about Kidani is that he was tweeting all through King and Queen of the Ring pay-per-view from Saudi Arabia. And his tweets are very, very telling. Very, very telling. And he also had tweeted about the fact that WWE has the partnership with Twitter/X to host WWE Speed, and it's all about the wrestlers having 5-minute matches. And Kadani was like, oh, that's cool. They probably saw us having the 15-minute New Japan World TV matches and wanted to do something similar, and they have it on X. And he's also wondering about like distribution and how widely everybody watches WWE Speed on Twitter. And I'm like, dude, you can do all of that too, but New Japan Pro Wrestling and Japanese culture in itself is still behind the times while also still being somewhat present, but for the majority of it behind the times. And sometimes you have to break through tradition to get a little bit up to speed, all puns intended, to where American fans are and the American world is. Now, everybody is entitled to go at their own pace. It's their life, it's their culture, their livelihood. But sometimes if you want to get more money into your business, you have to make certain changes. New Japan Pro Wrestling has to make certain changes. And I would think that cutting off the partnership with AEW might do them some good and partner up with WWE. Noah is seeing the effects of this. Rossi, who got kicked out of Stardom, even though he started Stardom, and that whole shit is nuts in itself. Rossi, who now has Marigold, is reaping the benefits of partnering up with WWE. And there are a lot of fans out there that will try to discourage you from thinking that that's a good idea, because they are so stuck in their ways and their narratives, and they think that WWE is always going to be about global domination. And while that may have been true at one point or another in the years of WWE being around before Vince really got kicked out and now it's Triple H and TKO, I think now they see the benefit of working together with other people and changing the perception of what it means to have a wrestling company alongside WWE. So New Japan Pro Wrestling, I would say that after Forbidden Door 3, that's it. Because if the reports are to be believed, and I don't really like dirt sheets like that, but if the reports are to be believed that AEW wants to open the Forbidden Door to other international promotions, most likely like CMML and like anywhere else, then it wouldn't be a forbidden door between New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW anymore. And guess what? Tony Khan fucked that up too, because what was special about AEW versus New Japan Pro Wrestling are the dream matches. However, I will still stand my ground and say, will you remember Forbidden Door 1, 2, 3, 4, however long this is going to go for? Because nothing is memorable. Dream matches can only go so far, but you still need a story and maybe some bragging rights on these pay-per-views to make them last. There's a reason why we are at WrestleMania 40 and 41, and it lasted the test of time because of the moments, because of the story, and because of the bragging rights. They weren't just dream matches thrown together because that's what you think is best for business. And while some dream matches are best for business, best for the fans, and just to sit there and just watch it, that's great. But again, will you remember any of the matches? That is what it is important, because nothing like a partnership between New Japan and AEW to have dream matches between two different companies has been done in the last 15 years, 20 years, you know? It's the idea and the concept that was great. But because Tony Khan is like, hey, I'll open up my checkbook and sign whoever from New Japan Pro Wrestling, he basically tanked the concept of having a Forbidden Door pay-per-view versus New Japan Pro Wrestling. So, like I said, if the reports are to be believed that when we get to Forbidden Door and we get other stars from other promotions, then what's the point of New Japan Pro Wrestling having this partnership with AEW if all they're going to do is take, then open the door to somebody else and then ruin that and again, New Japan Pro Wrestling is going to take a back seat to whatever Tony Khan does and whatever AEW does. And that is not fair for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, on the flip side, New Japan Pro Wrestling also needs to value their wrestlers, also needs to put them in the spotlight and give them the chance to shine and hold the company up. Now, New Japan Pro Wrestling has this system of you go to the dojo, you train for years. The training is grueling, but it's to build fundamentals, and I totally get that. But after the training, you go to excursion where you get to maybe pick where you want to go. If you want to go to Mexico, if you want to go to England, or if you want to go here to the United States, maybe like TNA will pick you up and you start developing a character which can make or break a Japanese wrestler from the dojo. It can make or break them because our ways are here is completely different from how things are handled over in Japan and what they are taught to do. And then after they do excursion, they come back, they sort of graduate, but there's still like a small restriction on them because you can tell that they're not ready to be jumped into a very primary role. But at this stage of the game, New Japan Pro Wrestling has no time to waste, but at the same time, you are going to maybe hurt one of the new graduates if we were to push them already into those voided spots. And now they have to do is play like chess to try to see who fits into what. But again, they have no time. But at the same time, if it take too long, people are just not going to be that interested in New Japan Pro Wrestling. New Japan Pro Wrestling needs to create some very interesting storylines. And this is where we get to the fun part, because you guys are probably like, when am I going to get to the Moxley thing and the Evil thing and House of Torture thing? Well, now we're going to go into it. Now that you know the background, let's continue forward. Jon Moxley defeats Naito at New Japan Pro Wrestling Resurgence. And instead of hopping on a flight to go from LA to Japan to show up at the next New Japan Pro Wrestling show to address the New Japan Pro Wrestling and general Japanese wrestling fans, he shows up on AEW Dynamite that Wednesday of the next week to address American fans who are watching AEW, and it doesn't make any sense. Because why are you on AEW television with the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship title to talk about your win and talk about your passion or lack thereof, or maybe you do have passion or don't have passion? Like, it doesn't make any sense, because it wasn't really consistency for you to have passion for New Japan Pro Wrestling and then end up signing an exclusive AEW deal. And only now you get to go and do what you want to do outside of that. I still find it kind of strange that when Tony Khan decided to lock down Jon Moxley to an exclusive AEW contract, that for the years that he's been with AEW, he hasn't really done much of the indies. He didn't really go to do too much of New Japan Pro Wrestling. But now that AEW doesn't need Jon Moxley at all to carry the company, he's able to go to different places, do the indies while he's IWGP champion and not my champion, and get to do stuff with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I wonder what's changed. And I brought that up and people got upset at me just because it's like, oh, they always let him do that. But not really. He was locked down for a good portion of his AEW career. And then now that he's not really needed in AEW storylines and the Blackpool Combat Club is basically nothing, that he could do whatever he wants now. Now, he ends up going to AEW Dynamite to address the fans that he won the belt, and then also call out Will Hobbs of the Don Callis family, because Will Hobbs attacked Brian Danielson, and Jon Moxley wants to be that friend and that protector, and as if like Danielson can't fight his own battles, and offers to have a match with Will Hobbs. And then Don Callis decides to use his power. Somehow he miraculously has power because New Japan owes him one, and makes it into an IWGP world heavyweight title match. And it's like, why? Why do you make it so convoluted that it doesn't make sense? You're having a match ahead of scheduled out stories that New Japan has a vision for, to have this bump in the road for what? And us fans already know that Will Hobbs is not going to become the new IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. Because this is meaningless and random fights, it does not add anything to the prestigious line of the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship title, even though this championship title is a redo with a whole new lineage, because they got rid of the old one. They got rid of version 4. So this version is a whole new lineage, but having random matches that mean nothing in the end, because we know that Hobbs is not going to go over to New Japan Pro Wrestling or Japan. If he does, that would be fantastic. I would want Hobbs to show up in the G1. I would want Hobbs to show up in New Japan Pro Wrestling, because I think that he has a lot of potential. I still believe that he has a lot of potential to give, but AEW just holds a lot of people back. If you are not Tony Khan's favorite toy to play with, you are held back. And I think that he will not go over to Japan. He may want to go over to Japan, and I would love to see that. But when you look at the bigger picture and the politics that get played into this, I don't think they'll send him over to Japan. I want him over there, but I don't think they would do that. And so we have this match, which was stupid. Will Hobbs ends up getting injured, which is unfortunate. And then we have Jon Moxley going to Japan to face Ren Narita, because that was in the line for it, because Ren Narita had jumped Jon Moxley, and Jon Moxley, the way he does promos of like, you bring your friends, I'll bring my friends, blah, 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 blah. Like, listen, guys, you have to really realize that he doesn't know how to do promos, that he doesn't know how to get emotion out the way that he should be getting emotion out. Just because you get all hyped up doesn't mean that, like, someone is going to relate to that promo or understand the hype or understand why the match is happening if you're just talking fucking nonsense. So he ends up fighting Ren Narita. Obviously, Ren Narita is not going to take the championship title off of him. So then at the next New Japan Pro Wrestling pay-per-view, okay, if you made it this far, you're probably yelling at me because I got the two pay-per-views mixed up. Jon Moxley versus Naito happened at Windy City Riot. That is where he became the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, not my champion, at Windy City Riot. That was in Chicago. Now, New Japan Resurgence is where we saw Moxley versus Shota Umino, his quote-unquote student, which I don't think Shota needed Jon Moxley as a mentor, as a trainer, because Jon Moxley does not have everything that he needs to have to be a mentor or a trainer, just because of it doesn't look or feel like he can train someone to be better. Because if all you're doing is training them on how to be a brawler, that's not what they are supposed to do. But let's get back to the situation of me mixing up the pay-per-views. So if anyone is yelling at me in the comments, like, just keep on listening until you get to here. I already said that I mixed them up because I realized, wait a minute, that's not how the timeline goes. So I'm correcting it now right in this podcast. And I will have to mention it again if anyone comments about it before they reach here. Anyway, so I don't think that Shota Umino needed Jon Moxley's guide, because Shota Umino has all the makings to be the next Tanahashi. People love him, and it's mainly women and children that love him. And with Tanahashi, women and children love him too. And Shota Umino has a very natural and organic vibrancy to him that he doesn't need Jon Moxley, when Jon Moxley is just someone that goes in, kicks ass, and pretends to be a tough guy. No, I could believe that when push to shove, Shota Umino can get very, very dangerous and very, very intimidating. Jon Moxley can't do none of those. So to have this student versus teacher that has never really been that long. It made no sense. And wrestling fans want to believe their own bullshit and want to believe their own narrative that just because they follow Jon Moxley in his personal life and follows Shota Umino in his personal life, that whatever happens in their personal lives should be talked about and be put in arguments and be put in debates and try to make the other person, when they look at it in an analytical point of view, trying to make the other person feel like, oh, well, you should have some empathy or some sympathy because of this personal reason. And Jon Moxley has a family and this and that. Like, no, you decided to become a wrestler. You decided to have sacrifices. You decided to become the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, and that requires sacrifices where you have to be in Japan to represent New Japan Pro Wrestling. There's nothing out here that represents New Japan Pro Wrestling other than the monthly strong pay-per-view events. And that's not even a big deal. It's a big deal when they sell out the arena at like 2,000, 3,000 tickets. That's awesome. But it's on a monthly basis. If New Japan Pro Wrestling kept the New Japan Strong brand that was a weekly episodic event, then I would not have a problem with Jon Moxley holding a New Japan Pro Wrestling title, because we'll see him on a week-to-week basis, on a month-to-month basis out here in the United States. The reason why New Japan Strong was created was to have something for the wrestlers to do during the pandemic. That's how that got started, and it was a very good idea because at least it kept New Japan Pro Wrestling in the minds of the American fans, and it was a lot more easier for stuff to happen and for things to get done, and for wrestling fans to be like, hey, New Japan Pro Wrestling, you should book this indie wrestler that we like because they fit your brand. They will do very great against your wrestlers. So it was a way for us to still be connected with a New Japan product that was on American soil. So that way we could still support New Japan Pro Wrestling that is across the pond from us. So it would have worked out. But unfortunately, life happens, situation happens. The guy that was running New Japan Strong got hired to go to WWE, and he's a referee over there in WWE currently. So after that happened, that is why New Japan Pro Wrestling decided to pull the plug on New Japan Strong weekly tapings for their events and just switch it to a monthly pay-per-view out here in the States, which doesn't do enough for the American audience to care about New Japan Pro Wrestling like some years ago when they had the New Japan Strong weekly episodic events. And if New Japan Strong was still around as a weekly show and Moxley would have showed up every single week or every other week, then I also would not have a problem with him saying that he has a passion for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Because if you are not present, if you are not committed, then you don't really have a passion. You have a passion, but it's not there to the level of commitment you want me to believe, because he has solely been in AEW for the past 3.5 years until finally he has nothing to do. So why not go over to New Japan Pro Wrestling just because, to give him something? And that's also another thing that in general wrestlers have to realize, that if you have completed everything that you've done, it's okay to take a little mini break to recharge and then come back and create a better, bigger interest in your character, in your performance, in your motivations, in your storytelling ability. It's okay to take a little mini break. You don't have to go on to the next just to go to the next. Even though I understand that this is a way to provide for yourself, provide for your family, put some food on the table. I totally understand that. But there are other ways in 2024 to generate an income that could be comfortable for the short break, for the short term. And then you come right back into wrestling and you go 0 to 100. So it's okay to take a break. Jon Moxley has yet to take a break. Anyway, his match with Shota Umino happens, and that's it. You know, the student fails, even though I wouldn't consider Shota a student, because what the fuck has Jon Moxley taught him other than the entrance? If anything, Hikuleo and ELP has taught Shota a lot more than Jon Moxley. Again, where is Jon Moxley in all of this if he says that he loves New Japan Pro Wrestling? Nowhere to be found. He's everywhere else except for New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I said that too on a tweet, and that didn't go very well. So let me explain this. Jon Moxley is the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. He's not my champion. But what would have been better was that instead of having his opening promo on AEW television on American soil with a different promotional belt, he would have had that same speech or maybe something different over at New Japan Pro Wrestling. Remind the fans who he is, tell the fans who he is, and what it means to be their IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, and the vision he has for this belt, the vision he has for the roster, the vision he has for the fans, and to take it all around Tokyo so that way New Japan Pro Wrestling can generate more money by selling more tickets. He has to be the marketing golden boy at this point because everyone else in New Japan Pro Wrestling has been interviewed and they're like, where is our champion? Jon Moxley is our champion. He's not here. He should be here. He has an obligation to be here. Every one of those guys were saying everything that I've been saying, but people on the internet want to make you believe that it's a work, it's a shoot. Don't work yourself into a shoot, brother. Well, guess what? If I'm saying it and they're saying it and New Japan Pro Wrestling barely does like worked shoots, most of them speak from the heart and most of them speak their mind, and they are frustrated with this, then that means you have to really look and pay attention that not everything in professional wrestling is a work. There are things in professional wrestling that are real, and New Japan wrestlers and Japanese themselves, they really wear their heart on their sleeve and they really say what they mean and what they believe and what they think. And the saddest part about this whole entire thing, watching it in real time, is that because Jon Moxley said on that interview show that RJ City has that social media is the worst and it's horrible and you should just throw it away, and he doesn't use social media. Well, how are you supposed to know that your coworkers in New Japan Pro Wrestling, the company that you are representing, don't like the fact that you haven't showed up as much as you should? Because any of them as champion would be there 24/7 to represent the title and to get New Japan Pro Wrestling to sell more tickets, get more people, and have merchandise fly off the shelves. Like, that's not being committed. When you're like, throw away Twitter, it's bad, it's horrible. Yes, it is. It is a cesspool. But there are relationships and friendships that you can form that are actually good people. You can find good things on the internet. It's just that the algorithms have created this massive vortex to only show the idiotic stuff, to show the negative things, to show the clout chasers. And that is what we get bombarded with every single day. And then I do think that social media has made most of the people stupid, even though I don't think they believe what they mostly type out on social media, that they'll say it in real life if you were to approach them. But that's neither here nor there. If he's just really disregarding social media and his coworkers are having a difficult time with like, yo, where is he? That makes him a bad champion, because it's like you have an obligation to fulfill. Now, this is what I would have liked to see. Jon Moxley's over in Japan. Put Jon Moxley on the Japanese news stations. Have a translator with him. Have signings. Have him visit the New Japan store in Japan. Meet fans, take pictures, do a vlog out there. And on his media campaign as being the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, not my champion, as he's on this tour, talk about how the partnership between New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW is beneficial for the both of them to cross and overlap their audiences. Because I can tell you right now that the Japanese audience that ends up getting AEW Dynamite, that is dubbed by El Desperado and 2 other people, and it rotates, I could probably tell you that those Japanese fans don't tune in to anything else. And they probably don't really care as much. I don't think it has a very good foothold on the New Japan World site. But either way, I would have liked Jon Moxley to do a media tour so that way he can build the relationship between New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW and himself and make him legit of why we should care that he's holding a New Japan Pro Wrestling belt and is not just used as a prop. Today is the 26th of May and it is Double or Nothing. And they're using the IWGP belt as a prop against Konosuke, who Konosuke has said that he's not having fun in AEW. And then I mentioned that, well, you have to come pre-built. You can't just come over here as your Japanese wrestler self and think it's going to get over in American wrestling, because most of the time it's not. It can work. Kenta's over. But for Konosuke, who lives and breathes the Japanese style, it doesn't really work. And no one really worked with him to have him transition into understanding what it takes to be an American wrestler over here on American television, being that he's Japanese. No one in AEW helps each other. Anyway, so on Double or Nothing tonight, it will be Jon Moxley versus Konosuke in an eliminator match, which means that if Konosuke wins, he ends up getting a future New Japan title shot. Now, does that make any sense? Like, I'm all for Konosuke eventually like getting a title. I'm all for that eventually. But what happens if Jon Moxley loses a title? What if he loses it to Evil on June 9th? And by the way, what story are we telling between Jon Moxley and Evil? We're not telling shit, because Jon Moxley, again, is still over here in the States while Evil is just back in Japan, and they're not doing shit. They're not doing promos. They're not doing vignettes. They're not doing shit. And this is what I get frustrated about. The only thing that comes close to trying to create story is that Evil took the belt, spray painted it, and then Jon Moxley cutting a promo that made no fucking sense. How are you saying, oh, this looks good, the color on the championship title looks good? Oh wait, but I can't talk about that. I can't give you praise because I'm supposed to be upset with you, Evil. You're so bad. And I'm gonna rid New Japan Pro Wrestling of Evil and all this kind of stupid shit. And it's like, dude, you're not good at promos when you are just talking off the top of your head. You can't go from, oh, we'll talk about this later, for making the championship title look good with black spray paint, and Jon Moxley is going to save New Japan Pro Wrestling from Evil and House of Torture. No, it's cosplay at best. Cosplay as a tough guy who thinks he knows how to cut a promo. And I think wrestling fans just need to accept that Jon Moxley is not the wrestler that you guys praise him to be. There is something wrong. There is a disconnect. And so on Twitter, I would usually state my opinion, and I still do. And I do think that New Japan Pro Wrestling is doing the wrong thing by having Moxley at the helm, because if you guys haven't noticed, Jon Moxley, whenever he's in promos or whenever he's doing an interview with other people, he tends to not answer directly. It tends to seem like he doesn't really want to talk about most things. And there's like no rhyme or reason that is believable. And I had tweeted out that, dear New Japan Pro Wrestling, there is a reason why WWE took that championship title off of Dean Ambrose, aka Jon Moxley, when he won it. That was the most bad thing that Jon Moxley could do, is not answer Stone Cold Steve Austin on the podcast. Like, someone should have prepped them to be like, hey, you're going to be on the podcast, make sure you answer stuff. And, you know, if he felt uncomfortable with some of the questions that Steve Austin was asking, there's a way to tell somebody like, hey, you know, I'll give you the short version of this, but I don't really want to get into it too much because I'm still trying to figure it out and go through it myself, like try to self-heal from all the bad shit that he experienced growing up and all this kind of shit. But it really doesn't look like not much has changed. And even when he left WWE to go do his own thing, there's nothing special. There's nothing memorable. There's nothing different that he's doing. He just wants to be like Mankind and all the hardcore deathmatch wrestlers, and it's fucking sloppy. It really is. It really is sloppy. Now, let me talk about House of Torture. because I know that's what people want to hear, and I don't want to rant too much about Moxie because some person would get upset at me. So, House of Torture. I was not really a fan, but then I came around. I wasn't a fan because, yes, I will agree that they have stupid shenanigans that make no sense. And it was a very constant shenanigan after shenanigan after shenanigan throughout all of their matches. And they always had the numbers game. And also with Kevin Kelly being on commentary at the time, it did not help at all. It really did not help because his disdain for the shenanigans in House of Torture and the numbers game really reached a fever pitch where I was like, you got to stop just hating on them and not realizing what they're doing within story, why they're doing what they're doing. And it was really annoying that every time they came out, he would just curse up a storm that they're there. And I totally get it. I get both sides. I get both sides of like, you know, they are annoying when it comes to shenanigans, and the other side of like people might like that stuff and find it entertaining. Sometimes the Japanese fans, you know, don't like it either. But throughout the years of me networking and talking with people in the industry, I got some, I guess if you want to call it insider knowledge as to why this happens. I just want you guys to know that Dick Togo, Jado, and Gato, those three guys was in ECW for some time, and they learned from Paul Heyman, they learned from the Dudleys, they learned from everybody else, and they were in a different environment of weapons, violence, sex, and everything in between, everything that made ECW great. You can say that this was sort of their like excursion. So, as these men were in America, they learned American traits when it comes to American professional wrestling. And that is, if you are a heel and then for you to get heat, you have to do heel things. So let's go and define these terminology. Heel, you are a bad guy. And heat means that the crowd is upset at you. And the way to do this is by either talking shit to the crowd, getting a reaction, beating up the hot baby face, and a baby face just mean a good guy, and beating up the hometown hero, doing something that is mean and just violent. So in order to get heat, you have to do the shenanigans. So after they were done wrestling here in America, learning our traits, they took it back to Japan and they started to implement it. This is where sometimes you'll see the Western influence, other than the foreigners coming in to New Japan Pro Wrestling to wrestle there for a different audience. And of course, the Japanese fans loved it, but it can be over exaggerated and can get annoying from time to time and all that. So that is what House of Torture does. Dick Togo is a manager to House of Torture and even a wrestler when he wants to wrestle, but he is the mastermind behind doing all the dirty tactics and doing all the heel stuff and doing all the shenanigans and really elevating each person in House of Torture to develop a character that is different from what you see over here. You have Evil, who's the King of Darkness, who went from LIJ and betraying Naito to creating his own faction. You see Yujiro, which he was part of Bullet Club. Now he went to House of Torture and his gimmick is known as the Tokyo Pimps, and he came out with the lovely, stunning Peter. You also have Yoshinobu, which he was part of Suzuki-gun, but Suzuki-gun disbanded and then he joined Just Five Guys. And then he betrayed them to join House of Torture. And you can think of Yoshinobu Kanemaru as the drunken uncle that when he is drunk, he does get the job done in the ring and he is a fantastic wrestler. So that's his gimmick. He brings out a bottle of whiskey and uses it to his advantage by spitting it out and blinding his opponent and getting the 1, 2, 3. But you could also think of him as that drunk uncle that is around everybody. You also have Sho, and Sho broke up with his tag team partner, Yo. And they were once known as Roppongi 3K, with Rocky Romero being their manager, and they were a hot babyface tag team, and Show decided to break the team up. I believe that's how it happened, and went over to House of Torture. And I think that was a very, very great move. They finally had a junior on their team, and Show has become the snake of the group. You don't know what he's gonna do. You don't know what he's thinking, and he does whatever the fuck he wants. He doesn't follow any rules. He takes what he wants. And he is our IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion. Show's character has definitely improved since leaving Roppongi 3K and becoming the heel. And everybody loves him. The women love him, and they bring signs. And Show has personality, and that's what everybody likes to see. Not too long ago, since we are in Best of the Super Juniors tournament, Clark Connors and Dan Maloney had a signing, and Show comes in wanting an autograph from both of them, acting as like a fan. And it was the most funniest, wholesome thing to see, even though Show is a heel and Clark Connors and Dan Maloney are heels. They're both part of Bullet Club, and Show is part of House of Torture. It's weird and complicated that they have not broken them or separated them so that way we can have House of Torture and Bullet Club as two separate things, rather than House of Torture being a subgroup within Bullet Club, but do not wear the Bullet Club emblem. Now, the other person that House of Torture has is Ren Narita. Ren Narita is one of the graduates. He's no longer a young lion. He graduated, went to House of Torture. And I think that works well for him because he is the mysterious guy. You don't know what you're going to get. They nicknamed him Soulless. So you have two guys that can be two juniors, or one junior and one heavyweight. And Show and Ren could work really, really well together because Show has that snake-like persona where, like, you know he's a snake, but he's the first person to talk and try to sell you snake oil, which is like something that's fake, but he makes it so believable that you're like, okay, I'll buy it from you. And then you have Ren Narita that'll just come in from behind and be like, oh, we got you, bitch, type of thing. So it works out. And this is what House of Torture represents in their characters that they have on the team. And then finally, I will mention Jack Perry, aka Jungle Boy, because I think that was a very smart, brilliant move to put Jungle Boy in House of Torture for the little bit that he's in there, because now the question is he still part of House of Torture even though he teamed up with the Young Bucks? Like, this is where the inconsistency lies with the Elite, Tony Khan, and just having an overall vision for wrestling. And I think I might want to throw New Japan in there too, because I don't know if they have meetings about this, but they should have meetings about story and vision and where we're going to go next. This is why WWE is so profitable. This is why WWE has this longevity, because they always look at the vision. Even if they make really bad decisions and we talk about it and we debate it, they basically look at the long-term vision. AEW, Tony Khan, the Young Bucks, New Japan Pro Wrestling did not really look at the long-term vision when putting Jack Perry in House of Torture. And I like the fact that he was there, because now Jack Perry gets to blossom and gets to really use all the heat that people are giving him. And it fits with the House of Torture aesthetic. It really does. Now he's back with the Young Bucks, and like all that aura is gonna fucking go, because the Young Bucks are so unserious while trying to be serious and trying to get the adulation of the fans who have turned away, but they come off like they don't care, but they really do care because they really do need them. And now you're probably wondering why like all this has to do with like Jon Moxley and the championship title belt. It's because once you know the backgrounds of House of Torture, you know, and the characters, then it should make sense for us to have a really good story played out, but we're not having a really good story play out. What we're having is laziness. And this laziness is not turning into passive income for New Japan Pro Wrestling. So, How does all of this relate? Because Jon Moxley does not know who's on House of Torture and doesn't know shit about House of Torture, but yet he will say that he is passionate about New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's passionate about the fans. He's passionate about wrestling, but you don't know who you're fighting. Evil is the king of darkness. He is a king of darkness for a reason. We've seen all of his shenanigans. We've watched everything that he has done. And the reason why they do the shenanigans is because it gets people talking, it gets a reaction, and the fans are going to react no matter what, right? So it just depends on where they are going. And this is what was told to me, that throughout Japan, New Japan Pro Wrestling has certain events, and if they're in Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, any of like the big city events in Tokyo doing New Japan Pro Wrestling and House of Torture does the shenanigans, they may end up doing medium to like slightly heavy shenanigans to get the reaction out of the fans, because the fans in the city districts understand professional wrestling. They may not understand it as deeply and as broadened and widened as American fans, where we want to know everything, want to be armchair booker, and basically kind of destroy our own fandom at the same time. The Japanese fans in the cities understand professional wrestling. They get it. So that's why they react. Now, when New Japan moves across the island to any of the suburbs of Japan, where it's all farmland and it's not as like huge city, and they have a lot of fans that come out to see their hometown hero, or they are wrestling fans, those fans don't understand wrestling like American fans, and they don't understand wrestling like how the city folk in Japan understand it. So that is why you get a different level of shenanigans across the board when it comes to House of Torture. And with Dick Togo leading the helm on the shenanigans and what to do. And then sometimes, well, not sometimes, most of the time, a House of Torture match is overbooked. Sometimes it's a good overbooked, and most of the time it's a bad overbooked. And I will call out both of them if they are good overbooked and bad overbooked. But that is what you need to know and understand about House of Torture and why they do the things that they do. And I hope that you gain a little more of appreciation with House of Torture, because I gave you that information. Because most of the time, wrestling fans think they know everything, but they don't know shit. And they're not out in the front lines asking people, networking with people, working the promotions, learning the ins and outs of professional wrestling. And those are the ones that you should not listen to, because they don't have that knowledge. I still work in professional wrestling, and I work behind the scenes, and I talk to people, and I create interviews, and I create podcast episodes that give you a little bit more knowledge for you to enjoy professional wrestling and to appreciate it a little bit more for what goes on behind the scenes. Because again, professional wrestling is a team effort. It's not just it's a team effort. With all of that being said, the only time we had the confrontation between Evil and Jon Moxley was when Evil decided to spray paint the belt. Jon Moxley said his promo, and then that's it. No other mention. And this is why I'm also frustrated, because instead of being over in Japan and doing something alongside the Best of the Super Juniors to create that story, to have Japanese fans invested in this, it's not there, and it's basically laziness again. So for June 9th, 2024, we are going to have at Dominion, and by the way, Dominion is also another big pay-per-view for New Japan Pro Wrestling. This is where more changes end up happening, more shifts end up happening, and surprises end up happening at Dominion as well. And we are still in Bullet Club month. So June 9th at Dominion, it will be Jon Moxley, who is not my IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, putting that championship on the line against Evil from House of Torture. And this will not main event the Dominion pay-per-view. There was a poll that got started on Twitter that basically asked the whole entire wrestling community, both Japanese fans and American fans, because you could translate the post, it asked them, what is the main event you want to see? Do you want to see the Best of the Super Junior main event or Jon Moxley versus Evil as the main event? In a landslide, ladies and gentlemen, Best of the Super Juniors won that poll because nobody cares about Jon Moxley versus Evil. Even though some fans may jump on here and tell me that, oh, it's just because no one cares about Evil and House of Torture. No, it goes both ways. You may feel something for both of them and you really don't care. Like, it goes both ways. No one is interested in Jon Moxley versus Evil because what is there to care about? There's not much there to care about. I care about it because I'm covering it and I want to make it better. So hear me out. Oh, and by the way, the Best of the Super Juniors has not been a main event on a pay-per-view like this or any other pay-per-view in the last 10 years. I think it's been a 10-year duration. Most of the time, Best of the Super Juniors, a main event, would be second to the main event of whatever pay-per-view they land on, which is basically Dominion. But this time around, Kadani actually listened to the poll and the crowd and made it happen. So change is coming. That Kadani and Tanahashi are maybe this isn't the partnership we expected to have. The fruitfulness is not there. It is a one-side partnership. Just like how TNA was nah, we're not doing this partnership anymore, AEW. You can go back over there. We'll stay over here. It was not worth it. New Japan Pro Wrestling is going to realize that this partnership with AEW is not worth it, but I'm hoping that they realize it ahead of time before it's too late. So we can say, well, fans can say, not we, because I'm not part of that. Fans can say that the only reason why Jon Moxley versus Evil is not main eventing is because most people don't like House of Torture, but I'm no, it has to be both. It can't just be one person. You can't just put the blame on one side just because your favorite person is Jon Moxley and vice versa. It has to be an equal blame because it is a company thing to make sure that this story gets out to the people and this story gets people excited and want to watch it and definitely want to be invested into it. So it's everybody. Again, I said this before. It's a team effort. It is not an I effort. It is a team effort. And most of the time, the comments and the fans forget that it's a team effort and they talk very selfishly where they want to put the blame on one person and not the other person and not the company. It is a team effort to make sure that professional wrestling is still alive. So essentially, I would just like Moxley to become the champion and not just use it as a prop. Look like you care about someone else's property and feel and look like a champion and not just look like someone we just got to be an actor and pay to be an actor. And that's all it is. And somebody would say that, well, wrestling is acting. Yeah, to a certain degree, but at least it's believable. All I want is something believable from Moxley for me to believe that he is worthy of holding that IWGP World Heavyweight Championship title. And you guys might call me a hater. That's totally fine. That just tells me that you didn't listen to this whole thing with an open mind and with a different perspective coming in. Because I know it's very hard to change your own perspective. I know it's very hard to change your own narrative, especially when you live in your own little bubble. It's totally okay to not agree with me. If you agree with me, that's fine. But keep it civil if any of this made you upset. But this all had to get out, talked about, and I finally got the courage to do it because most of the time people think that Jon Moxley is doing a very good job. People think that the partnership between New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW is a very good thing. On paper, it's a very good thing. But when you see it in real time with everybody else, and you realize that this may not have been the best idea, and that maybe New Japan Pro Wrestling should cut ties now And then in July, when WWE makes their debut back to Japan to go and network and ask questions and get a partnership with WWE in July. And yeah, on Twitter, I was like, New Japan, WWE is heading over there. Go talk to Cody. Go talk to the rest of the boys. And then go talk to any personnel. I just want New Japan Pro Wrestling to succeed, make money, and get that aura back. That was the whole point of this podcast episode, was to bring to light, I guess if you want to call it rants, and stuff that we talked about. I just really want New Japan Pro Wrestling to become stronger than what it is, because Kadani was right. It's not fair that New Japan Pro Wrestling and Japanese companies have become the farming system for US companies like AEW. And like I said earlier, that AEW just takes without realizing anything, without no vision, and was just like, oh yeah, you're a brand new toy, I could pay for you, rather than WWE picking and choosing what's best for business. And then New Japan Pro Wrestling can branch out and get more deals and end up getting a better American deal out here and start touring a little bit more if they had the funds, and maybe go overseas. They started to go overseas, but to go bigger and better. AEW is still doing the same circuits and still got the UK market, and that's it. They haven't went anywhere else fancy, which they should be. They should be doing that. If Tony Khan has all the money in the world to buy all the wrestlers in the world, why can he not go to France, Germany, and other places that him and the AEW roster has never been to? Why? If he has the money, he could automatically do it. But he's been staying on the same circuit for the last 5 years and hasn't been growing in the last 3.5. It's been on a decline, whether you want to admit it or not. But the numbers are there. Numbers don't lie. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm going to be talking in circles. I really do hope you listen to this whole entire thing with an open mind. And I am keeping in mind that there are going to be trolls, that there are going to be haters, because it never fails. It really never fails. But I am happy that I had gotten all of this out, that I said this, and I basically brought this all to light of why I don't think Jon Moxley should be IWGP Champion. I think that Moxley should be in Japan, not over here, using the title as a prop. And shame on Tony Khan for not having a vision and taking something away from New Japan Pro Wrestling that at this point in time, New Japan Pro Wrestling needs support and not be put on life support. I love New Japan Pro Wrestling. That is my next goal, is to work with and for New Japan Pro Wrestling in any capacity that I can. And I do not want to see New Japan fail, because New Japan brings a different type of aesthetic, a different type of storytelling to professional wrestling. And it should be here. The same way as the crowd on Twitter that says, enjoy all wrestling. Wrestling is for everyone. Well, New Japan Pro Wrestling is in that conversation too, right? New Japan Pro Wrestling, Japanese wrestling is in that conversation of enjoy all wrestling and everyone is welcome in wrestling, right? It should be. If not, let me know. And then I would know the hypocrisy on enjoy all wrestling and wrestling is for everyone, because it's not fair that everyone would be like AEW this, AEW that. Oh my God. But when it comes to New Japan Pro Wrestling, it's like, who? Ew. Who's that? Japanese wrestling? Ew. Like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to an episode of the Square Circle Podcast, because if not, this is going to go on for a couple more hours, because it is mind-boggling that we have people that want wrestling around versus not wanting wrestling around, and it gets really, really confusing. But I do want New Japan Pro Wrestling to succeed. I do want New Japan Pro Wrestling to have that aura back, because they are special. And I believe in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I love the fact that Tanahashi is our New Japan Pro Wrestling president, because he can save New Japan Pro Wrestling. He has saved New Japan Pro Wrestling a number of times, and he is the perfect person to be the president. But until they start listening to people who actually care and want to support and will give ideas and try to make something happen, which I'm here for, I don't know what's going to happen. But I am very hopeful that New Japan Pro Wrestling will find its legs. I am very hopeful that New Japan Pro Wrestling will eventually go back to the status that it once was by creating new stars and crowning new people as champion. Hell, they could have put Jeff Cobb as IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, but no, they gave it to Moxley, who is contracted to AEW. Make it make sense. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to an episode of the Square Circle Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you listened to it with an open mind. Make sure to go follow me on all social media. Follow me on Twitter at Marie_Shadows. Sign up and become a member for free to Substack, my newsletter, marieshadows.substack.com, and also the new thing over at Locos, which is wrestlingroots.hub.locos.com. Every single link will be down in the description below. Just click on it, follow me, support the channel. And if you have any type of feedback, any type of criticisms, they should be constructive criticism, not just blatant hate or negative. But if you want to send me a message, you can email me at squaredcirclepodcast@outlook.com. You can also send me a DM on Twitter. You can also reply to this because it will be on the Substack newsletter, which is also named Wrestling Roots Hub. You could also leave a comment there. So marieshadows.substack.com is where you would go if you were to sign up to the newsletter, that you can get all of my newsletters directly to your inbox for free. You don't have to pay anything unless you want to pay for extra content, or you can leave a comment over on the YouTube side of things or a comment on the wrestlingroots.hub.locos.com. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to rant and you listening and sharing it out. You have been listening to an episode of the Square Circle Podcast. I am your host, Marie Shadows, and I'll see you guys on the next one.